Allow me. Allow me to welcome you to the interview once again.
Thank you.
We shall
Thank
start
you.
with the part of introducing yourself to anyone listening to us and those who will be viewing this episode.
Yes. It's nice to be on your show.
Okay, I was saying you can introduce yourself to those who are listening to us and everyone who will be viewing this interview on YouTube.
I'm Sandra Dallas. I'm a writer in Colorado. I write about, I'm not an historical novelist, but I set my novels in historic settings, primarily 19th century West, or 20th century West as well. I was a reporter for Business Week magazine. I was the Denver bureau chief for many years, and I covered hard rock mining and alternative energy development and a lot of things that I later incorporated into my novels. I started writing fiction when I turned 50 and have written 17 adult books and 5 mid-grade books. I write primarily books for women, but they are harder edged than most women's books. I deal in issues that women faced in historic time periods and what the conditions were like back then. They were very difficult for women. For instance, a woman coming west over the Overland Trail during the gold mining days probably had no choices as to whether she wanted to go or not if her husband told her to go. She didn't have any, there was nothing else she could do. So life was really tough for women back then. I write about the Depression and how women pulled together in very difficult times. My books, as I said, tend to be for women, but I do have men readers.
Thank you. That's impressive. That is impressive. Last episode, I was having Australian author J.J. Carpenter. She was with me on the show, and she was sharing with us still about her book. She's having a novel which she dedicated to the Great Depression. It's also having the
Yes, the
same
Depression was a really hard time for everybody in the United States. I don't know how it was worldwide. I think it was difficult for most people. In the US, I wrote a book called The Persian Pickle Club. It's about a quilt circle in Kansas, a group of women who got together periodically to make quilts or piece quilts. And they would share their troubles with each other. Their husbands didn't really understand that it was women who held the families together, who managed to stretch the budget to include food and all the expenses they had. It was women who were supposed to be helpful, always looking at the positive side. Men were not particularly sympathetic to women during that time, but women were sympathetic to each other, and they shared their problems and also their joys with each other over a quilt circle. Quilting is very much an American phenomenon. Quilting was certainly not invented in the US, but it reached its zenith in the US. And for women, it was a way to share their troubles.
My second question will be, when do you discover the passion of writing?
I'm sorry, where did I discover what?
The passion.
The Depression?
The passion.
My parents lived through the Depression. They were married in 1933. They both lost their jobs, and they moved to my grandparents' farm in Kansas. my father felt that he could um, earn his living by helping my grandfather on the farm. One day a neighbor came over and said that he would offer $1 for a day's work in the field. My dad worked so hard that he finished up by noon and made just 50 cents that entire summer. Farming was not for my mother. She had grown up in a town. My mother worked harder than any woman I ever knew. She said farming was just too rough. And she said she was going to go into town, into Topeka, which was the big, was state capital of Kansas. And she was to find a job, and she wasn't going to come back until she did. And she did exactly that. And so they later moved off the farm. But that's the basis of my book, The Persian Pickle Club, which is actually about a murder that this group of women in Full Circle cover up.
According to what we have so far shared on the interview, I discovered, even when I analyzed your catalog of books, I came to realize that you normally use Colorado and Kansas as your setting. Why this? Why Kansas and Colorado? And even there is an award that you won in the past years. It was a Kansas community-based award, if I'm to remember very well. Why Kansas and Colorado as your setting?
I'm sorry, why what?
Why Kansas and Colorado for your settings? Most of the books are set in Colorado, then Kansas.
Jimmy, I'm having trouble understanding you.
I am saying, when I took a closer look at your catalog of books, I came to find that most of your setting in the novels, you are using Kansas and Colorado. Why
Yes.
why these areas?
Why did I set it in Kansas?
Mm.
I set it there because my father grew up in the town called Harveyville. So I set it there. Originally, I changed the name of the town, and then I thought, no, I should do this for my dad. It was a difficult place because of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, which happened in the Midwest in the United States during the Great Depression. The land dried up, there was no water, it didn't rain. And so the dust blew from Kansas, thousands of miles away to New York City and out to the Atlantic Ocean. And it was a very dry, difficult time. And the crops, of course, dried up and couldn't be harvested. The book was optioned for a long time for a movie. And the woman who had the option, her husband had won an Academy Award for his film work in Avatar. And she did the most beautiful teaser for the movie, showing a woman driving through Kansas and the dried fields and the laundry flapping on the lines. And I wish it could have been made into a movie because it would have been beautiful.
So you mean we're having a movie for the prequel, the Persian Pickle Club?
Yes.
Is there a movie for that book?
I'm sorry, what?
Are we having a movie from the novel, The Persian Pickle Club?
I wish it could have been made as a movie because I think it would have been very well done. And there was a script that was a wonderful script. And the problem is raising money. My books sell primarily in the United States. They don't have, they're quintessentially American. They don't have the international appeal that a movie needs. And the books really don't appeal to 18-year-old boys who like to go to the movies and see lots of fireworks and action. So they were never able to raise money for it.
No, sometimes problems come up when it comes to money issues. But what I can tell you, I appreciate your storytelling, and I was checking with the reviews from our various book clubs. Their discussions, they love your work, and this really pushed me to look for you, and we have this amazing interview. If you can look down in
Right?
your if you can look down in your chat box, I've posted the third question. Let us talk about your persistence in writing. Can you get me? Hello.
Yes. I'm
I'm,
sorry, I didn't get that last part.
I am saying, let us talk about your persistence in writing. What has driven you all over these years? Perhaps you can share with a rising writer outside there.
What has driven me to write?
All over these years.
I've always been a writer. I majored in journalism in college. I never really expected to write novels. And I started out at the age of 50. Two friends and I were going to write a bodice buster, and that didn't work out. But I realized then how much fun I had writing fiction. And I liked the freedom of writing it compared to journalism. Journalism, you have a notebook over here, and you have to get the words into your computer in some sort of readable fashion. And you have to stick to the facts. In writing novels, there are certain facts you stick with, but you can make up things. For instance, in one of my novels, I needed the name of a hotel in a particular town, Hannibal, Missouri, which is where Mark Twain grew up. And I searched all over to find a hotel name, and I thought, well, what does it matter? I'll just make it up. And so I like that kind of freedom that comes with writing, but it's also, journalism is a very disciplined career. If you you don't get writer's block. You don't say, gee, it just isn't coming today, I can't write this story. If you do, you get another job. So I developed the discipline to write every day. And I love sitting at my computer. I don't outline. And I love sitting at my computer and discovering what's going to happen. This morning, I'm writing a book, or trying to. And it occurred to me that a friend of the sister was going to play an important role in the book. Yesterday, I didn't even know the sister had a friend. And so I love this kind of thing.
Oh.
What I have trouble with is writing sex, and I absolutely can't do it. My books are about one shade of gray. They're just fortunately, my readers don't really want sex in books, but I remember very early on I tried, and I sat down at my computer, and I'd been thinking about this all day, and I thought, oh boy, wow. And so I wrote, he unbuttoned the top button of her blouse. And then I sat for a very long time, and I wrote, the next morning. And so that's about as much sex as I have in my books.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Because it's useful. On the platform, we are having many rising writers all over the world. And I think this is good advice to many of them. When it comes to writing about sex, it's a trend which many authors have adopted. However, it's good also to have boundaries as a writer, and I appreciate that. I think many will borrow that from you, will borrow the leaf from you, that you can still stay in with your boundaries and come out a remarkable writer. That's me. That's what I think.
It's not that I'm a prude. It's just that when I write, that kind of thing doesn't come out. I'm reading a book now, and it's just filled with women talking about profanity, all kinds of the F word, and there is so much of that in writing today. And I'm not sure that people really talk that way, that it's in there, I suppose, for the shock value. But after a few words, it's not shocking anymore. And it just seems that there is so much of that in writing today.
They
And
have
I guess that's what readers want.
they have adopted it as a trend. You know, the trend of storytelling has changed, whereby writers are now focused on writing things that are going to trend, not things that are going to stay. Back then, writers were writing stories that were going to live years and years. You find a book in the library, and still the story sinks deep. But nowadays, it's about the trend. It's not about the story. You're right with that.
I'm sorry, what about?
You're right about the trend. These days, people are writing to fit in the trend.
I think today, one of the things that we've done today is to address racism, and words that were commonly used are considered inappropriate today, so you don't find them in a lot of books. And I think that's a positive thing. One controversial thing came about with the book American Dirt, where a woman wrote about
I beg your
a
pardon?
journey from American Dirt. Do you
Okay.
know the book?
I,
Um,
I'm not certain with the title.
I'm sorry.
I don't know the book.
It's about a woman and her child who go to America from, I think it's Guatemala, and they go up on uh, it's a horrible journey made by foot. We have in the US so many people coming from this across the southern border into the United States, and many are fleeing not just poverty, but crime, and they're fleeing for their lives. Well, the book was criticized because the woman was not Hispanic, and these people are Hispanic. So the question is, do you write from somebody else's point of view? Do I, as a white woman, write from a Black woman's point of view? Does a non-gay man write from the point of view of a gay man? So that's a big issue among writers today. I have some problems with it. It seems to me if you are able to write from the standpoint of somebody else, you should be able to do it. But you have to do it correctly. And it's very hard. I don't think I, for instance, could write from the standpoint of a gay man or from somebody of another race. But if you can do it, then I don't think you should be stopped.
Right. Right. There is a lot to be done. There is a lot to be done as an industry about the new trend of storytelling, because I think if people don't rise up and address these issues, it's going to affect the way stories are being told. And we are going to miss out on a lot because of this.
Well, certainly, minority writers should be published. People of other races and or sexual orientation should be allowed to write. But I'm not sure that people who aren't part of that shouldn't be allowed to write that too.
It takes me back to what I usually say. This takes me back to what I usually say. I'm always telling people that if the book is not for you, don't write a review. Sometimes we go with all these spoilers when we are writing reviews for the books that we read, that our friends recommend to us with bias. Reason being, we don't take time to understand what was the intention of the writer, which audience was this particular book being addressed to, and we miss out on a lot. That's what I think. Every book has a particular audience being written to. So as a reader, as a critic, as a journalist, you must understand that first before criticizing a story, before giving a story a spoiler, before you rate any book.
I think so. I think all people should be allowed to tell their story.
Sure.
And if it's their story, perhaps it takes precedence over somebody else telling their story.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been an amazing conversation. However much we had the network issues, maybe the other part. What feedback have you been getting from your readers? How are they relating to your stories, to your books? What's your experience with your readers?
The feedback I get from readers when I give talks or meet with book groups is generally very positive, because they're there because they like my books and they are predisposed to being entertained and to communicate with me. Many of my readers believe that I'm exactly the way they are. If they like my books, they assume that I'm their religion or their political party. I've gotten emails from people. I'm very liberal, and they assume that I'm conservative and will make political comments. So I have to tell them or just sort of ignore them. They also think I'm their religion, and they will ask me my religious beliefs. And I usually just say, well, I'm a Presbyterian and I don't talk about that. I don't very often get critical remarks from readers. Occasionally they'll point out errors or they'll take issue with something I've said, but my books aren't that controversial. So I really, I wrote a book once about the worst overland trail tragedy in U.S. history, the overland trail being the route west during the gold mining days.
Which book is that?
The book is called True Sisters,
True
and
Sisters.
it's about the Mormon handcart expedition.
I'll check it.
The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints liked to bring many of its converts to Utah, and it was very active in proselytizing in the British Isles. And so they figured out if they would push handcarts to Utah instead of going in covered wagons, they could go very cheaply. Well, the handcarts were poorly made. They left too late in the year, and so many of them died of starvation and freezing to death. And it was, as I said, the worst overland trail disaster in U.S. history. It's not very well known. One of the a review that I got from a Mormon woman was that I was not that religion, and therefore I shouldn't talk about it. That the book should be faith promoting instead of telling about the horrors of the trail. And I don't believe that. I believe you write it. It's not my place to promote a religion. And I've gotten a few comments like that on that book, but most of the comments have been very positive. People writing and saying, I never knew what my great-great-grandparents went through when they came west, and now I understand. So my books, as I said, aren't controversial. And most of my readers, what readers I hear from tend to be positive,
Mm.
which is
Amazing.
not to say everybody likes my books. I'm sure there are plenty
Not,
who
not,
don't.
not every time we write,
Yeah.
people fall in love. Sometimes we expect that side of criticism. Okay, maybe the other part. For me, according to what I read when I went through your works and different profiles and what different readers were sharing about your books, they find them relatable. The experiences, because it's like when you read your book, I got a chance to read The Persian Pickle Club. And according to me, rather, according to what I read from your note, I came to realize that what you are telling, the stories that you are telling, you are giving your readers an experience of, rather, an adventure of your life experiences. And that's really good.
Well, thank you. I hope that it's accurate. I feel that that's what the women went through. I've talked to my grandmother and my mother, and one story my mother told me was that a woman across the road had made this beautiful quilt, and she wanted to sell it for $10. And mother knew it was worth a lot more than $10, but she told her, I just don't have the money. And the day before my parents left, my mother had gotten a job in Washington, D.C. And the night before, the woman came over and said, would you pay $7 for the quilt? And mother did. And when she told me that story, she said, I knew it was worth more. And I felt bad paying her so little, but I didn't have the money. And she needed this to sell the quilt. And we have that quilt. I have it upstairs on a bed. It's been used many times, and mother loved that quilt, but she always felt guilty about it.
Amazing, amazing. It's touching, I have to say. We are left with a few minutes to the end of our interview. I will use these last minutes to invite you to talk about your latest books. Coyote,
Um,
Where Coyotes Fall, then Tough Luck.
Tough Luck is my latest book. It's much lighter than most of my books. It's about a couple of orphans who decide they're going to come west and find their father, who had gone west to find a gold mine. This is in about 1865. And so they team up with a teamster who's driving mules, and they have all kinds of adventures on the trail. And then they get to Colorado and try to find their father. And eventually it ends up in a kind of con game because the father's been cheated out of a mine. And the girl who is narrating the book, she's been compared to the character in True Grit. Um, she comes up with a way that she's going to get that mine back. So it's a fairly not lighthearted. There's some hard-edged things in it. There's some rough passages, but it's a much lighter book, and I think it's more fun than some of my books.
Oh, is it available in audio? Is it available in
Yes,
audio?
yes. All of my books are available in audio,
Oh,
which is strange because the characters don't sound like I had envisioned them. And some of the names are mispronounced, and that bothers me. But it's just very odd for me to listen to those characters speak in the dialogue that I've written.
yeah, amazing. I will try to check out on Tough Luck. I appreciate a copy. If I get a copy, I'll find time and read through.
I'm
Hello,
sorry,
I'm breaking. I was saying, I appreciate your sharing on this book, on this particular one. I think when I get time, when I get a copy, I'll get read Tough Luck. And
oh, good. I'll make sure you get a copy.
thank you. Then I'll share with you my review, then put it somewhere in the column, in the weekly magazine.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. So let me okay, let me invite you you give your final remarks to our dear listeners and everyone who has been following this conversation. Your final remarks. Hello.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're
I was
sending me remark.
I was saying,
You will send me the remarks.
I will send you the reviews, but right now
Thank you.
I want us to conclude with this meeting. You can now give your final remarks to everyone who has been following this conversation and everyone who has been part of this.
Oh, thank you. That would be nice to see what the reactions are.
Okay.
And I apologize for not being able to hear very well.
Sorry. Because I was trying to conclude. If you can, give your final words to anyone who is listening in, anyone who will be following up this conversation. Your final words to them, and even the rising raters outside there.
You want, I'm sorry, you want me to give you my email?
Final words to the listeners.
Say a word to the listener?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, Jimmy.
Final words.
Say.
Your final words. The last words.
I am, last word?
All right.
We got it. Well, thank you for listening. And I hope you're better off at understanding than I am. Thank you for listening to this. This is fun, Jimmy.
Oh, thank you.
It's always nice to talk about yourself.